Hey folks, welcome back to Higher Ground with me, Christina, and my colleague and partner in crime, Josh. Today, we're excited to talk a little bit about a big happening in our sector and a big milestone anniversary for Teach for America. And we have the man himself, Niloy, who's planning the 35th anniversary summit on the pod. Josh, do you want to say anything else about the setup for this episode?
Yeah, it means Niloy and I had been talking about the 35th anniversary summit, proud 2007 alum from the Mississippi Delta, and have stayed connected to Teach for America, even though I, like many alums, only intended for it to be 2 years. And part of what I think you and I have been talking about, and I shared with Niloy, was I really am appreciative that Teach for America is recapturing the narrative, because education's been in such a depressed state. The teacher is like, no, we are going to put a shot in our arm and we're going to re-energize. And it's just, to me, seemed like such a good opportunity for other leaders and other ed organizations to think about how can they capture a similar optimism. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts, because you work with so many leaders, of how they could also think about recapturing the magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing is not letting ed reform labels, negatively define you. Right. So I think that people have been a little bit on their heels or a little bit apologetic. And how can we still have a proactive message around families and communities and loving and caring for everyone? I think that it's a little bit focusing on what you're doing and the results you're achieving versus political narrative around you. And I think it's also, they'll be having really honest heart to heart with yourself. We've talked with Kimmy about this. We've talked to others about this. Am I doing things to community, or I'm doing with? I think this is a great opportunity, and TFA has had an increasing focus on it in recent years, but I would imagine the summit's an opportunity to look at that and think of, are we engaging community actively in our work?
Yeah, I'm an avid sports fan. I'm not shy about that. But I think about one thing that I love studying is like when a college football program totally turns around, right? An example would be when Urban Meyer got to Bowling Green in the early 2000s. They went 1-11 the first year and they went 11-1 the second year, like when he got there. And he talks about, what I did was I invited everybody into the locker room and I said, these are the 3 things we're going to accomplish. This is how we're going to work. If you want to stay, you should stay. If you don't want to stay, I will sign your transfer paperwork right now. And he said, we got every single person out of the locker room who didn't believe and didn't want to be there. We replaced them and we kept moving. And what I think is so interesting is we're not saying that we have to do that with people, but I think with the narrative, say, hey, this is the narrative that's going to stay. It's 2026. This is the narrative that has to go. This is what we're going to believe about kids and communities and the work we do every day. This is what we're not going to believe. And so I really appreciate that. And I wonder, we've been talking about a lot this season, idea of doing things with communities, shoulder to shoulders with communities and not to communities. And again, you've just been talking with leaders for 2 decades. And I'm curious your thoughts. If you're a leader listening to this, how do you do things with the community and shoulder to shoulder?
It's so hard to have time for this, but some of it is just before we act or before we make decisions, thinking about, could I engage in the decision making to get their perspective and have them feel heard? And sometimes that's regular coffees or cafecitos with families. Sometimes that's having parent councils or open board meetings. I'm actually a huge fan of the open board meeting, even having spent a dozen years on a board here in California that was an open meeting where there's a lot of gymnastics to it. I'm actually a fan of people being able to see what's happening behind the scenes in open view. And sometimes it's just having that informal kitchen cabinet of people that you call, say, hey, I'm about to do this thing. What do you think? And then there are the more classic things like having parent nights and bringing folks into school, doing data presentations where you're really honest with parents about where we're meeting the mark and not. But I think that it's just that constant push and support of educators and engaging people. So what are you excited about with the 35th anniversary, Josh, as an alum?
It's been interesting. I mean, it'll be my 20th anniversary for Teach for America and graduating college and doing all the things. So I'm excited for that and just seeing my friends. But I think it is this reclaiming of the narrative and getting excited about the work we're doing. I think COVID kind of put us into a ditch and we're slowly crawling out of the ditch, but this is an opportunity to run out of the ditch and be like, no, like the work we are doing is important. So, I think Niloy is no better messenger. He was a Bay Area core member. He was a leader in New Orleans. And he's just been, again, I think somebody who gets you ready to, run through the brick wall. So that's what's gotten me excited.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've teed up the episode. Is there anything else you want to say about your conversation before we hand it over?
No, I think we can go talk some Teach for America.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the second part of today's pod. I'm really excited to have Niloy Gangopadhyay here, who's Vice President of Teach for America's 35th Anniversary Summit. To be fully transparent, I feel really old because I can remember the 20th Anniversary Summit and thinking that was really cool. Now I'm like, wow, it's been 15 more years. So thank you for taking the time, and would love if you want to just give like a 30-second introduction for folks.
Thanks, Josh, for having me on. My name is Niloy Gangopadhyay. I was a Bay Area 2002 core member. That was my foray into education. And then I've done a variety of work in education, the K-12 system. Served as a principal in Cleveland. I served as a single site chart school ED in New Orleans post-Katrina. So I was deeply rooted in that community. And then I also was the executive director of special populations at Texas Education Agency. So I went from like the micro to the macro, and then worked at a few other nonprofits and CMOs. And I came back home to lead this work around the 35th Anniversary Summit.
Awesome. Okay. Things I just learned too. We were talking before, and where I want to really start is the jobs blast took off in 2022. A theory is that it took off because people were really tired coming back into brick and mortar buildings after COVID. And I was sharing remote opportunities where you could go home and not be in a school or system leader seat. And it's totally evolved, right? Like, so I now share school and system leader roles. But I'm having this existential crisis of our schools, our kids, our communities still deeply need teachers, leaders at all levels, from the classroom all the way to the superintendent suite. And people are tired and they are walking away from where we currently are in the conditions. And because you're in your seat with the 35th anniversary, I feel like you're looking back 35 years and looking forward 35 years. And I'd love to hear what people listening should be thinking about or doing to capture what we've done, but then try to draw people back into the work.
For sure. What I love about my job, Josh, candidly, is like connecting with alumni. I think I had a good pulse of both from a qualitative perspective and a quantitative perspective, the impact that Teach for America and other folks have had. But when you take a step back, like no other entity has produced more classroom teachers, more school leaders, more systems leaders, more ed entrepreneurs, and more civic leaders than Teach for America over the past 35 years. And if you take a look at the current number of alums who are still teaching and add the core members, first and second years, we'd be the fourth largest teaching force in the country, only behind New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, right? And I think people have every right to feel downtrodden. We went through a pandemic. Education shifted arguably in a way that it had not since brick and mortar schools were developed, like in the Horace Mann era, right? And I think we've dealt with a lot in the country and continue to deal with it. And I can understand why there is a exodus. And I think we're not anchoring enough to what we've accomplished because the current reality is we have a long way to go. And so I think one of the things that we failed to do, whether it's myself as an alum, is to amplify stories of success, because we generally, those that are doing the work often feel like, hey, the work will speak for itself. We're going to approach this with humility. And so I think we need to figure out what has worked, what will work, amplify that. And then to your point about the future, bring new folks into the work, right? Like what inspired me and what inspired you is that, hey, this is a civil rights issue, right? There's inequities that exist in public education. Your future should not be dictated by where you're growing up. And we did something about it. And I think our plea with alums is do something. That is a new slogan in the 35th campaign. And with our incoming or potential core members, we're just framing like this is the most important work that you could be doing right now. And we want to pump it up in a way that feels authentic and genuine and like doable, right? Like you probably know better than I do what the current generation wants in work, which is different than when you and I were coming through the trenches with Teach for America. And so I think we just need to like bring more hope and optimism into the space and ground it in successes that we've had and say we faced these before. And we have a ways to go to get to one day, but we certainly are in a better place than we were 35 years ago.
I've been thinking a lot. I'm learning a lot in my role, talking to just job seekers who are not interviewing for a job, but just kind of messaging me on LinkedIn and saying, can we connect? You know, it took me until about last month to realize that the Gen Z group is now 28. They're 28 years old. And to your point about what job seekers want, they've been in the workforce 6 to 7 years. Some of them did TFA. They were born in 1997. and onward. And it started to make me think about they are tired. I hadn't thought about the Horace Mann analogy yet, but millennials and Gen X almost feel like we're heading for the exits early. And to your point, amplified and accelerated by COVID. And we're not having a really succinct baton handoff with Gen Z. And we're just saying, hey, there's these vacancies, hop into a school leader or system leader seat. And I feel like you all are on the forefront because you've thought through how to recruit people into the core. And I know that a large part of that comes from recent college graduates. As y'all look forward, I'd be curious, what have y'all figured out that other people should be learning about how to talk to people who are emerging into the workforce right now?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think there is a lot of time and attention given by our recruitment team to figure out what are they hearing, talking to folks that are doing the core, that are not doing the core, that are applying, deciding not to take the position, right? And I think, it sort of varies, right? Depending on the part of the country that you're in, it sort of varies on the type of school that you're in. And I think that what I will say that I'm excited by is that there was a point about 5 to 7 years ago where we saw like sort of this foray into education or sort of supporting work in low-income communities, whether it be urban or rural, had sort of fallen off. And it was powerful to see that it's coming back. And I think it's the way that you frame it, right? Like, I think Teach for America's brand and marketing team does a really good job of figuring out what the sweet spot is about like what people need to hear and what will be appealing, but also be, again, authentic and genuine about the work it's going to take, right? And I think different generations, probably respond to like, this is the most difficult thing that you're going to do. Folks don't want to hear that, right? And they want to hear about the support, right? They want to hear about a lot of the wins. And I think there was a time and place, whether you were a traditional district or high performing charter, where that wasn't the case. It was like, you're going to work extended day, extended year, and that's how you're going to get the results. And people responded to that. So I think it varies. I think as you'll notice on our website, some tweaks and adjustments every year. I think we're still trying to figure it out. So I don't want to overstate or over-index how well the organizations filled it out. I will say something that you said, right, is I think the folks that might be like tapping out 6-7 years in, I think that's really key for us to figure out is how to keep folks in the work, right? And I think about tying this back to the 35th Summit is that in talking to alums, particularly people who were in the classroom when the last time a summit happened, or even people in the sort of nascent stage of their like leadership journey of like being in a room full of 10,000 people or 13,000 people, hearing from phenomenal speakers and just being in this space to say, I'm not alone in my isolated classroom, in my isolated building, right? Like I am part of something bigger. We're trying to get to one day. And that's a selling point for those that are in the education system to come to the summit, right? It's like, granted, it's like 11 months out, but it's like you will drink from the well of inspiration, right? You are going to be inspired. You're going to be reminded that you made a commitment in your current role, but a bigger, broader role to ensure that every child has access to a high quality education, right? And I think that's what we got to be firing on all cylinders to get people to come out to that. But like, that's something that I think is incredibly important. Like, even when I was a school leader in New Orleans, when I would go to local programming and I would go and address the incoming core, I would be inspired by that energy, right? Of the young 20, 21, 22, 23, 24-year-olds. And so like, we all need that, right? I think we've gotten away from that because there are many reasons why we've gotten away from it. But I think that's what people need to hear more than ever, this hope and optimism piece.
Yeah, I think it is interesting you bring up hope and optimism. I was just doing some work with AI yesterday. I won't be like, I read the Harvard Business Review. No, it was AI where I was like, what makes Gen Z different? What do they look for in work? And some of the themes that popped up were, it wasn't hope and optimism, but it was mission and purpose, right? Like, I do want to go somewhere. Another part was like clarity and boundaries, but then also being okay with the idea that we're not staying in a role for 30 years. And can we just talk about that and it not be taboo, right? Like, could we talk about that I want to stay in this role for 3 to 5 years and talk about what does onboarding into the role and transition planning look like, hopefully, as opposed to me being like, hey, by the way, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, right? So there was just a lot that I was like, man, I just feel like we could learn a lot from them. I wonder what it looks like after the summit, right? So to your point, whenever I talk to chief people officers across the country right now, they're talking about how more people are staying in the classroom and more people are staying in school leader seats. They're suspicious of, is it because the economy is bad, right? And so people are just like staying put right now to see where the tailwinds go. But I'm curious, like, let's say we go to Vegas as Teach for America alums. And if you're not an alum listening, you're invited to be an alum for this podcast as we listen and explore. But after the summit, what does it look like 3 months, 6 months, and a year later?
So I think, there's an assumption here that people will be poured into in October, and that energy, particularly if they go with peers, will be able to help fuel them for the remainder of the year. But I think we want to draw a through line to say, listen, by coming to the summit, if you're an organization or entity that is investing in sending people there, it's like we see retention numbers rise for a little bit. We also see an opportunity where human capital, people can move from region to region or stay in their region. Like we'll have north of 300 sort of like offerings, right? Because we want to hold space. Sorry, real quick. We realize federal funding reduced, state funding reduced, local funding reduced, right? So there's like this sense of like, what does it look like for people that want to switch careers? And the Jobs Blast does that, right? There's a lot of opportunity, and then you're constantly selling to people, hey, even if you feel like you're not ready, this is the time to apply, navigate, to spend some time. So we want to have that and hold space for people. I think we want to be clear too that like we want to see an increase in systems level leadership, school level leadership, classroom sort of like teacher plus roles. And we want to make sure that people see a line, hey, I attended the summit happened, and we were able to give people the energy that they need to not just continue the year, but think about that long term. So that's one piece. The second piece I think about is actually for folks that are not in the education system right now, 43% of our alums are going on to do incredible things, right? In the public sector, in the private sector, whether they be attorneys, running healthcare nonprofits, or practicing medicine, or in the finance, whatever you call it. They're coming back. They're itching to tap back in. They've been on the sideline, right? And yes, they can do a donors choose and create a classroom for people, supplies list. They can get like pay for people's Amazon wish list. But there's folks that want to like civic leadership. They want to run for office, or they want to support people who are running for office, right? They have time, talent, and treasure. And we also want to draw a line to say, hey, listen, in every one of our communities, right? After October 2026, we saw an increase in dollars flowing into like the ed ecosystem. We saw more folks starting nonprofits that are tackling some of the stickiest problems that we're trying to solve. Number three, we're also seeing people run for office. When I see my core member district for the last 2 years, we've seen superintendents not finish the year. Like that's a place that is so near and dear to my heart. I still keep in touch with about 10 of my former students from 20 plus years ago. That's a place that should be thriving, and it's not. Right. And it's like, I wish I lived in San Jose so I could run for office. Right. So I want to make sure that we have tangible wins grounded in data that can say we had this event and it served as a catalyzing moment, not only for Teach for America, but for the future of excellent education. And getting people that are not in the ecosystem to tap in their way with time, talent, treasure is going to be important. And getting people who are in the ecosystem to continue, people oversay this, but it's like fight the good fight, right? And being inspired and being connected. And I think like you can go to a restaurant and be inspired by something that's on the wall, but like there's going to be a ton of inspiration here that we want people to drink from the well, and then galvanizing towards action in the communities they serve. So whether you're in DFW, whether you're in Memphis, whether you're in Florida, like we should see communities improve in certain outcomes based on the attendees at the summit.
Well, I'm going to pause there, but I want to make sure that listeners know we'll put the 35th anniversary summit information in, but I was excited to bring you on and glad that we had the conversation, because I feel like when Teach for America got started, it started the conversation in 1990 about what does it look like to radically rethink not having zip codes be destiny for students. And I think right now, as the sector is trying to catch its breath, this is a real opportunity to pause, reflect, catch your breath. Whether you're a Teach for America alum or not, I feel like you'll feel the ripples of this. So I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh.
All right, have a good one.
Take care.